The first reason I never played PoE 1, there's simply too much to learn. I gotta admit, I felt intimidated hearing things like, oh, you can play 1,000 hours and you're still a beginner. Now, if you look at the PoE 2 side of the equation, this honestly still might be true, but the fact that this is a new game, it makes me feel like everyone is a beginner in some way. It removes some of the intimidation factor, for me at least, knowing that no one is gonna be an absolute expert on day one. Basically, instead of jumping into a war zone full of Navy SEALs, PoE 1, I'm excited to be one of those junior basic marines surrounded by others just like me in PoE 2. Back in the day regarding PoE 1, I remember hearing things like, unless you follow a guide, you're gonna brick your character. And if that's true for a game, that's not very inviting for me. I don't want to play a new game glued to my second monitor trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do in this game. I want to be immersed in my character and make decisions as I go based on the gear I find along the way. And PoE 2 seems to really allow for this way of playing. I've heard Jonathan Rogers say that they've been playtesting trying to consciously make the worst possible choice in their build and that it should still be somewhat functional. I like that. And when you combine this with cheap respeccing, the ability to change the stat nodes, they're recommending support gems for your skills. Oh, and also when it comes to systems like crafting, for example, they've designed it so that you get to use and familiarize yourself with the system as you play through the game for the first time. So you learn as you play, rather than getting to the end game and being hit with a million new systems to learn all at once. This sounds like it's going to reduce the feeling of overwhelm, which is good. So as you can tell, a big reason why I never played PoE 1 is because it just seemed too complicated. Now, what's funny about that is I want to play PoE 2 because it is complicated. Perhaps it's because I've been blasting Diablo 4 for 18 months and my tiny little brain is craving some challenge. And 10 years ago, I don't think I was ready for a game with this level of complexity, but now, honestly, I think I am. The next reason I never got into PoE 1 is because the gameplay and the user interface is just gross. Now, it's just my opinion based on what I saw back in the day. Like, the gameplay, it's just visually messy and it felt outdated. It just wasn't attractive to me. In contrast to that, now with PoE 2, it's honestly some of the most beautiful gameplay and graphics I've ever seen. The skills feel immersive and impactful, and as I watch the gameplay, it just makes me want to play the game, which is opposite to how I felt when I first saw PoE 1 gameplay. And overall, I'm just excited to play a game where mechanical skill and your execution as a player matters. I remember early on seeing some clip of loot on the ground in PoE 1 without the loot filter on, and I was shocked. It was a huge turnoff for me. And I honestly haven't seen much regarding loot in PoE 2. Maybe it will be similar to PoE 1, and I guess that's fine because I haven't seen many people complain about this. It's not ideal from my point of view, but I'm assuming a really good loot filter just changes everything. And then in PoE 1, don't get me started on seeing the menus, like the chests and the tabs and the skill trees and the gems they put in the items, all the different materials. All of it just seemed so overly complicated and unintuitive, like a really poorly designed city with roads going everywhere. Now, it might have been fine for the players of the game, but just at a first glance from the outside from a 30-second YouTube video, it did not inspire me to want to play the game. And even though PoE 2 still looks pretty intense when it comes to the amount of map and skill trees and inventory management, it at least seems like they've removed some of the clutter and overall made improvements to make this aspect of the game feel better than it did in PoE 1. Now, when I first heard about PoE 1 like 10 years ago, I considered it like a small niche, indie, like work-in-progress mod of a game. It just did not inspire me to want to give it a go. Now, of course, this was just my perception at the time, and I was probably wrong, seeing how successful the game really has been since then. And now, with a new perspective, GGG, the company making PoE, they've completely changed the game. And I don't mean just like the game, I mean the entire industry of gaming. People are literally throwing hundreds of dollars at this company because they stand out like a tall poppy in a field of rotting plants that is the gaming industry today. I mean, first of all, this game is free, and they're waiting to launch the game, making sure that it's an actual finished product. Also, they're not only listening to player feedback, they're innovating the entire ARPG genre, giving players things they didn't even know they wanted. GGG is like an underdog story of a company that started with nothing in New Zealand of all places, and that has risen to the top through merit and quality of their product. The energy around this company is starting to feel like Blizzard at its peak. My point with this rant is I might have been ignorant to the direction of PoE 1 and the quality of the devs behind it, but that's no longer the case. I'm a huge fan of how Jonathan Rogers is so open, transparent, and authentic publicly, and how he just makes sense in how he answers questions about the game. Once I started listening to his interviews and presentations, I've been nothing but excited to play whatever game he and his team decides to make. In summary, my perception and relationship to these games has has completely shifted. My perception of PoE 1 is that it was lame, and my perception of PoE 2 is that it's the GOAT. It's not even out yet. 10 years ago, I made a judgment call about PoE, and I held on to that belief and never considered changing my mind. It's like a kid that decides at the age of 5 that they don't like broccoli and goes on to never eat broccoli until they're like 30 years old. And then they realize, hang on a second, this is actually pretty good. That has been me with PoE. So now, to keep that metaphor going, consider PoE 2 broccolini. Although very similar, it's different enough for me to consider that it is in fact a new thing worth another taste. It's time to log in.